The avoidant is experiencing something they never anticipated. Your silence has become the thing that haunts them most. Not your anger, not your tears, not your desperate attempts to get them back. Your silence. The complete absence of you from their life. The total withdrawal of your energy. The absolute lack of any signal that you're still thinking about them or affected by them. Your silence is their nightmare because it's the one response their psychology isn't equipped to handle. The avoidant knows how to manage pursuit. They create distance. They know how to handle emotional intensity. They shut down. They know how to deal with someone being visibly hurt. They rationalize that the person is too sensitive or too needy. But silence? Genuine, sustained, indifferent silence? They have no script for that. Your silence is proving to them that you've moved on, that they're no longer important to you, that their presence or absence in your life has become irrelevant. And this irrelevance is activating every terror the avoidant has spent their life defending against. The silence is showing them that they're not as important as they assumed, not as unforgettable as they believed, not as central to your world as their ego required. Your silence became their nightmare because it's doing what their own behavior never did. It's making them feel what they've made others feel. Insignificant, forgettable, easily replaced. The silence is a nightmare specifically because it's the inverse of everything that usually happens when the avoidant ends relationships. Usually the people they leave stay emotionally engaged. They reach out. They express hurt or anger. They try to understand what happened. They hope for reconciliation. All of this continued engagement, even when it's painful, serves the avoidant by confirming their importance. Someone is thinking about them. Someone is affected by them. Someone cares enough to pursue or to be hurt. But your silence contains none of this. Your silence is void where engagement should be. It's absence where presence usually is. And the void is terrifying because it signals that you've done what the avoidant always claims to want, but actually fears most. You've genuinely detached. You've moved on, not just behaviorally, but emotionally. You're living your life as if the avoidant never mattered, as if the relationship never happened, as if they're just another person you used to know, but have no current feelings about. And this genuine detachment is the avoidant's nightmare because it proves that their defense mechanisms, their carefully constructed walls, their performance of not needing anyone, all of it was worthless. You left anyway. You moved on anyway. And you did it so completely that they're now the ones stuck thinking about someone who's not thinking about them. The nightmare quality of your silence is intensified by the fact that silence gives the avoidant nothing to work with, nothing to interpret, nothing to analyze or respond to. When someone is angry, the avoidant can tell themselves the person still cares. When someone is hurt, the avoidant can rationalize that the person is too sensitive. When someone pursues, the avoidant can maintain their power through withholding. But silence provides no emotional content to process. It's just absence. And absence can't be argued with, can't be rationalized, can't be controlled. The avoidant is used to controlling dynamics through managing their responses to others' emotions. But your silence means there are no emotions to respond to, no pursuit to withdraw from, no intensity to manage. You've removed yourself so completely that the avoidant has lost all their usual strategies for maintaining their sense of control and importance. Your silence is nightmare because it's the one response that makes them powerless, that gives them nothing to react to, that forces them to sit with the reality that they matter so little to you that you don't even think about them enough to be angry or hurt. The panic that silence creates in avoidant psychology. Your silence is creating panic in the avoidant that they've never experienced before. The panic is about the loss of control they took for granted. The avoidant was always the one who controlled distance, who decided when to be close and when to withdraw, who determined whether the relationship continued or ended. But your silence has taken all that control from them. They can't control your distance because you're not responding to their presence. They can't decide when to be close because you're not available for closeness. They can't determine the relationship's status because you've already determined it's over through your complete withdrawal. The panic is the avoidant recognizing they're not in the driver's seat anymore, they're not the one with power, they're not controlling anything. And for someone whose entire identity is built on maintaining control through withholding, Losing control is existential threat. The panic your silence creates also includes the avoidant realizing they can't make you react. They're used to having impact on people. When they withdraw, people pursue. When they're cold, people try harder to earn their warmth. When they're distant, people work to close the distance. But your silence proves they have no impact on you. Nothing they do or don't do affects you visibly. They can't make you pursue through withdrawal because you're not pursuing. They can't make you work for their attention because you're not interested in their attention. They can't affect your emotional state because you're not in emotional relationship with them anymore. The panic is about recognizing they're impotent, that they've lost the ability to influence you, that their usual tools for maintaining importance in people's lives don't work on you. Your silence is nightmare because it's showing them they're not powerful, they're not in control, they're not able to create the dynamics they're used to creating. The silence is also creating panic because it's making the avoidant face the possibility that they've permanently lost you. As long as you were engaged, even if you were angry or hurt, there was possibility of reconciliation. The door wasn't fully closed, but your silence is closing that door. Every day of continued silence is another signal that you're done, that you've moved on, that reconciliation isn't something you're interested in or available for. The avoidant is panicking about this permanent loss because they operated from assumption that you'd always be available if they changed their mind, that they could leave and return at will, that you'd be waiting whenever they were ready. But your silence is proving all those assumptions wrong. You're not waiting. You're not available. And the permanence of the loss is creating panic the avoidant isn't equipped to manage. The panic from your silence includes the avoidant facing their own attachment to you that they denied while you were present. They told themselves you weren't that important. They minimized the relationship. They focused on your incompatibilities to justify their distance. But your silence is forcing them to confront that you did matter, that they were more attached than they admitted, that losing you actually hurts in ways they didn't expect. The panic is about facing their own feelings that their defenses were supposed to protect them from. Your silence is breaking through every defense, making them feel what they've been avoiding. They cared about you, they're attached to you, they need you, and all of these realizations are arriving too late because you're gone and you're not coming back. The desperation that replaces their usual detachment. Your silence is transforming the avoidant from the detached, unbothered person they performed being into someone desperate and unraveling. The detachment was always performance, but it was convincing performance. The avoidant seemed genuinely unaffected by relationship outcomes, genuinely comfortable with distance, genuinely fine with being alone. But your silence is revealing that the detachment was facade. Behind it is a person who's desperate for your attention, desperate to know what you're thinking, desperate to regain some sense of importance in your life. The desperation is showing in their behavior. They're checking your social media obsessively. They're asking mutual friends about you. They're finding excuses to be places you might be. They're doing all the things they used to judge in anxiously attached people, and they're doing them because your silence has activated their attachment system in ways nothing else has. The desperation manifests as the avoidant trying various strategies to break your silence. They might reach out with casual messages that seem innocuous but are really checking if you'll respond. They might create situations where you have to interact with them. They might post things on social media designed to get your attention. Every attempt is the avoidant trying to restore the dynamic where you're engaged with them, where they matter to you, where they have some form of presence in your life. But if your silence is genuine, if it's maintained regardless of their attempts to break it, each failed attempt intensifies the desperation. The avoidant is learning that nothing they do can make you engage, and this powerlessness is driving them to try harder, to become more desperate, to abandon their usual cool detachment entirely in pursuit of any response from you. The desperation your silence creates is also about the avoidant's ego being unable to accept that someone has truly moved on from them. The avoidant's ego requires believing they're unforgettable, that people they've been intimate with carry them forever, that their impact is permanent. But your silence is threatening this ego structure. Your silence says you've forgotten them, or if not forgotten, then at least released them enough that they're no longer occupying your mental space. The ego can't tolerate this, and the intolerance is creating desperate attempts to restore their importance. The avoidant needs to believe they matter to you, needs evidence that you still think about them, needs confirmation that they're still significant in your world. Your silence is denying them all of this, and the denial is creating desperation that's completely antithetical to the avoidant identity they've cultivated. The desperation is nightmare for the avoidant because it's forcing them to see themselves accurately. They're not the unbothered, detached, independent person they believed themselves to be. They're just as needy, just as attached, just as desperate for connection as the people they've always judged. Your silence is holding up mirror, showing them their real self, and the real self is nothing like the identity they've constructed. They're clingy when someone is genuinely unavailable. They're anxious when they can't control someone's attention. They're desperate when someone they care about genuinely doesn't care back. Your silence is revealing their avoidant identity as fraud, and seeing themselves clearly as nightmare because it means everything they believed about themselves is lie. The obsessive monitoring that silence triggers. Your silence isn't making the avoidant forget about you. It's making them think about you constantly in ways that are consuming their life. They're monitoring your social media with frequency that would be concerning if anyone knew the extent of it. They're looking at every post, every photo, every story. They're analyzing everything for clues about your emotional state, about whether you're dating someone new, about whether you ever think about them. The monitoring is obsessive, and it's happening precisely because of the silence. If you were engaging with them, they could get information directly. But your silence forces them to gather information covertly, and the covert gathering becomes compulsion they can't control. The obsessive monitoring includes the avoidant trying to interpret meaning from the smallest pieces of information. You posted a photo looking happy? They're creating elaborate theories about whether the happiness is genuine or performed, about whether you're trying to show them you've moved on or whether you've actually moved on. You're spending time with friends? They're analyzing who the friends are, whether any of them might be romantic interests, whether you're filling your life with activities to avoid thinking about them, or whether you're genuinely engaged with your life now. Every piece of information becomes data point in elaborate analysis the avoidant is conducting, and the analysis is happening constantly because the silence gives them nothing direct to interpret. They're filling the void of your silence with their own projections and theories and obsessive thoughts. Your silence is also triggering the avoidant to monitor mutual friends and connections for information about you. They're asking casual questions that seem innocent, but are really intelligence gathering. They're bringing you up in conversation to see what people say. They're trying to get information without revealing how much they care about getting that information. The monitoring through others is the avoidant trying to maintain connection to you through indirect means, since direct connection is unavailable. And the fact that they're going to these lengths, something they would have mocked in others, is evidence of how thoroughly your silence is dismantling their usual psychology. The obsessive monitoring is nightmare for the avoidant because it's evidence of how much power you have over them through your absence. While you were present, while you were engaged, the avoidant felt powerful through their ability to withhold. But your silence has inverted the power completely. Now they're the ones who can't stop thinking about you. Now they're the ones whose attention is captured and held. Now they're the ones who are powerless to direct their thoughts elsewhere. Your silence is revealing that you have all the power now, and the power is yours precisely because you're not using it, because you're not even paying attention enough to recognize that you have it. You're powerful through your indifference, through your genuine lack of engagement, through your complete absence from their life, while they're completely unable to absence you from their thoughts. The comparison to past relationships that makes this nightmare unique. The avoidant has ended relationships before. They've withdrawn from people before. They've disappeared from people's lives before. But your silence is different from how those previous people responded. And the difference is what makes it nightmare. Previous partners stayed engaged. They reached out. They tried to maintain connection. They showed they were affected. And all of that engagement allowed the avoidant to maintain their comfortable narrative. They're the one who doesn't need anyone. They're the one who can walk away easily. They're the one who's unbothered. But your silence is providing no evidence for that narrative. Your silence says you're the one who doesn't need them. You're the one who walked away easily in the end. You're the one who's unbothered. The role reversal is nightmare because it's forcing the avoidant to experience what they've made others experience, and the experience is unbearable. The comparison to past relationships is also making your silence more haunting because the avoidant is recognizing you were different from everyone else. You were more patient, more understanding, more willing to work with their limitations. You gave them more chances, more space, more grace than anyone else has given them. And despite all of that, despite being the person who accepted them most fully, you still left and moved on completely. This is forcing the avoidant to face that if someone as patient and accepting as you couldn't sustain relationship with them, maybe no one can. Maybe the problem isn't that they haven't found the right person. Maybe the problem is them. Your silence is making them confront this possibility in ways previous relationships didn't, because previous partners left with enough emotional intensity that the avoidant could tell themselves those people were too reactive, too emotional, not understanding enough. But you were understanding enough, and you still left. And you left so completely that it's impossible to blame you for not trying hard enough or not being patient enough. The avoidant is also comparing your silence to the engagement they're getting from new people they try to date. New people are interested, are pursuing, are showing clear desire for connection, but the new people feel empty compared to you. The new people's engagement feels hollow because the avoidant doesn't care about it the way they care about your silence. They'd rather have your attention and rejection than someone else's attention and interest. And this realization is nightmare because it's proving that you're not replaceable, that what they had with you was unique, that they destroyed something irreplaceable and they're never going to find it again. Your silence is the loudest statement that you were different, you were important, you were special, and they lost you through their own patterns. Every new person who's not you is just reminding them that you're gone and you're not coming back. And the reminder is coming through your silence, through your complete disinterest in them, through your clear message that their history you've moved past, the nightmare of facing consequences without escape. Your silence is nightmare because it's consequence the avoidant can't escape, can't rationalize away, can't defend against. Previous consequences for their patterns were escapable. Someone got angry, they could tell themselves the person was too sensitive. Someone left, they could tell themselves it wasn't meant to be. Someone was hurt, they could rationalize that hurt is part of relationships ending. But your silence isn't giving them any emotional content to rationalize or defend against. Your silence is just absence, and absence can't be argued with. The avoidant can't tell themselves you're too sensitive when you're not expressing any sensitivity. They can't frame you as too needy when you're showing zero need for them. They can't rationalize your silence as anything other than what it is. You've moved on, and they're stuck with consequences they can't escape through their usual defensive strategies. The consequence your silence represents is also inescapable because it's internal. Previous consequences were external. Someone left, someone was angry, someone cut contact. But those external consequences could be avoided by moving on to new people, by creating new relationships, by distracting themselves. But your silence is creating internal consequence. The avoidant is stuck with their own thoughts about you, their own regret, their own recognition of what they lost. They can't escape their internal experience by creating new external situations. They can try to date new people, but the thoughts about you persist. They can try to move on, but the regret intrudes. Your silence has moved the consequence from external to internal, and internal consequences are inescapable because you can't run from your own mind. Your silence is also consequence that compounds over time rather than diminishing. Usually when relationships end, the pain is acute initially and then fades, but your silence is creating the opposite pattern. Initially, the avoidant might have felt relief that you stopped pursuing, stopped expressing hurt, stopped being present in their life. But as time passes, as your silence continues, as it becomes clear you're genuinely gone, the impact intensifies. The avoidant is learning that time isn't healing this wound. Time is making it worse because every day of silence is another day of recognizing you're not coming back, another day of living with the permanent loss, another day of facing that they destroyed something they can't restore. The nightmare is consequence that doesn't diminish, that doesn't fade, that gets heavier the longer it continues. The inescapable consequence your silence represents is also nightmare because it's forcing the avoidant to face themselves. While you were engaged, while there was drama or pursuit or emotional intensity, the avoidant could focus on managing you, on responding to your behavior, on controlling the dynamic. But your silence removes you as focus which means the avoidant is left with only themselves to focus on, and focusing on themselves means facing their patterns, their limitations, their role in destroying the relationship. Your silence is forcing self-confrontation the avoidant has spent their life avoiding, and the confrontation is nightmare because seeing themselves clearly means seeing how much they've cost themselves through their fear and their defenses, and their inability to be vulnerable when vulnerability mattered. The realization that silence proves you were stronger all along. The nightmare your silence represents includes the avoidant's dawning realization that you were always the stronger one. The avoidant thought their strength was in their detachment, in their ability to walk away, in their capacity to be alone. But your silence is proving that real strength is what you're demonstrating. The ability to let go of someone you cared about because staying wasn't serving you. The capacity to move on completely rather than staying stuck in obsessive thinking. The power to live your life fully rather than organizing it around someone else's limitations. The avoidant is recognizing that what they called strength in themselves was actually fear, disguised as independence. But what you're demonstrating through your silence is actual strength. The strength to choose yourself, to enforce boundaries, to walk away from dysfunction and not look back. The realization that you are stronger is nightmare because it inverts the entire power dynamic the avoidant relied on. They felt powerful through being less attached, less affected, less invested. But your silence is showing that being less attached while still being stuck thinking about someone isn't power. It's just inability to fully attach, combined with inability to fully let go. You're demonstrating actual power through your ability to attach deeply enough that the relationship mattered and then let go completely when the relationship proved unhealthy. The avoidant can do neither. They couldn't attach deeply while you were there, and they can't let go completely now that you're gone. Your silence is proving that you have capacities they lack, that you're stronger in ways that matter, that their version of strength was always weakness pretending to be powerful. The strength your silence demonstrates is also nightmare, because it means you're capable of things the avoidant isn't capable of. You're capable of genuine detachment rather than defensive detachment. You're capable of moving forward rather than staying stuck in regret. You're capable of building a life that's fulfilling rather than building a life that's just defended. Every day your silence continues is evidence of capabilities the avoidant doesn't have, and recognizing your superior capacity is nightmare for someone whose identity was built on being the more capable, more independent, stronger partner. Your silence is revealing that you were always the healthy one, the functional one, the one with capacity for real relationship. And they were always the limited one, the dysfunctional one, the one incapable of receiving what you offered. Why your silence is more powerful than any words could be. Your silence is nightmare for the avoidant, because it's more powerful than anything you could say. If you were angry, they could defend themselves. If you were hurt, they could rationalize. If you were pursuing them, they could create distance. But silence gives them nothing to respond to, nothing to defend against, nothing to manage. Your silence is statement that's absolute and undeniable. You're done, you've moved on, they don't matter enough to you anymore to warrant any energy at all, not even the energy of anger or hurt. The silence is the most devastating message you could send, and its power is in its finality, in its completeness, in its demonstration that you've moved from caring about them to being indifferent to them. The power of your silence is also that it forces the avoidant to fill the void with their own thoughts. When you were expressing feelings, the avoidant could focus on your feelings, but your silence creates vacuum that gets filled with their feelings, their thoughts, their regrets. The silence makes them the one who's stuck processing, analyzing, obsessing. The silence gives them no choice but to face themselves and their patterns and their choices, because there's nothing of yours to focus on anymore. Your silence is turning them into the anxious one, the one who can't let go, the one who's stuck. And experiencing this role reversal is nightmare, because it's showing them what they've made others feel, and the feeling is unbearable. Your silence is powerful because it's teaching the avoidant the lesson they've needed to learn their entire life. Actions have consequences. You can't mistreat people without eventually losing them, and some losses are permanent. Your silence is the consequence they couldn't escape, the loss they can't undo, the permanence they have to live with. And learning this lesson through the specific pain of losing you, losing someone they realize now they were more attached to than they admitted, is nightmare that's teaching them what their patterns cost. Whether they'll learn from the nightmare, whether they'll use it as motivation to change, whether they'll do the work to become capable of different relationships in the future, that's up to them. But the nightmare is yours to give, and you gave it perfectly. Through your silence, through your absence, through your complete withdrawal of the energy and attention and care they took for granted until it was gone, and they discovered too late that they needed it more than they ever admitted, wanted it more than they ever showed, and miss it more than they'll ever tell you because you're not listening anymore. And your silence is the loudest statement anyone has ever made to them about what it costs to be loved by someone who eventually learns to love themselves more.